Have you ever been convicted of a crime?
Yes.
What was the crime of which you were convicted? Did you in fact commit those acts?
I'm going to invoke my Fifth Amendment right.
Privacy was very important to Jeffrey Epstein.
Please state your full name.
I'm Jeffrey Edward Epstein, and my residence address is 6100 Red Hook Boulevard in Virgin Islands. Same answer.
Were solicited for prostitution in Paris?
Same answer.
Have you ever solicited a minor for prostitution anywhere at any time?
Again, I'm going to assert my right. What'd you study? Physics.
Mr. Epstein built little cabanas and beach houses all across the island.
66 different days that he violated his probation. He would go to the airport, jump in his helicopter, who knows where he went.
Yes, I report back to jail at 8 p.m.
Every single day?
Yes, sir.
Is it true, sir, that you have what's been described as an egg-shaped penis?
No, in fact, the Supreme Court recently said that the Fifth Amendment right is there to protect the innocent. So, I'd like to answer that.
Talk about Jane Doe 102, Virginia Roberts.
What's the last name? How's it spelled?
Do you know Virginia Roberts?
So she's again who?
Prosecuted for these crimes, isn't that right?
Objection, argumentative, harassing, and calls for a legal conclusion.
Can you spell it? Can you spell it for me, please?
Okay, we are live, people. This is Addy Addy Skywalker, chosen one of YouTube. This is the first broadcast on brand NewTube, live broadcast. Let us know how we're doing here, folks. And we're talking the Epstein files today with regards especially to the recently released Ghislaine Maxwell documents, which just came out a few hours ago, actually. I have been reading them this morning. Unfortunately, they are heavily redacted. Regardless, we have a lot to talk about because I'm joined today by George Webb, investigative journalist, and we're going to get George Webb on Jeffrey Epstein for our inaugural and debut episode of the Epstein Files. So I want to thank George for coming on the Epstein Files broadcast, and this is my first time broadcasting on brand NewTube on BNT. They've been very supportive of my work, and I want to extend my gratitude and thanks to the folks over at brand NewTube out of the United Kingdom, supporting free speech, the First Amendment, and freedom of expression worldwide through their video platform. And as I was saying earlier, I was reading much of the Ghislaine Maxwell documents this morning. Well, skipping around, and it's pretty long. Released several hundred pages of documents, heavily redacted, in particular the names, although some can be assumed, such as Prince Andrew. But I wanted to ask George Webb today about his whole take on the entire Epstein saga. Now, George Webb's main focus has been NATO, but of course, our good friend Jeff has some links to everything that's going on, even to this day right now. And that will be something that will be the case until next year, as Ghislaine's trial will not be till July. Again, she was arrested on the 2nd of July of this year in Bradford, New Hampshire. So I just want to thank you, George, for coming on the show. This is my first broadcast on BNT. I'm hoping it's going smoothly. And I just wanted to, welcome you today. We're in the afternoon now, so good afternoon to you, sir.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Addy. And I'll scoot over here a little bit closer. The broadcast that you've been seeing over Addy's shoulder in the opening shot was we're here in Michigan. We're at the Neighborhood News Hour. So that's the YouTube channel that Addy's been contributing to. So when you see him over here doing these 2-hour long deep dives on Hunter Biden's laptop, Hunter Biden's BlackBerry, and so forth, that's what's going on in the background. So check us out at Neighborhood News Hour. And that's NN Hour, NN, like hour on the clock, HOUR. And then you can get to see the website and so forth. So that's what's going on. That's the association between Addy and I. Addy and I have been really kind of working together about a month. We started interviewing each other about 3 months ago through this whole COVID thing. And I just, the reason why I threw my support behind Addy was just because he was coming up with all this great stuff on YouTube. He's a great young investigative journalist, and he looked into the COVID thing. He brought all these, not necessarily weighing in on any side, but he brought in all these doctors. You remember you brought in the 6 different doctors and had these 6-way roundtables with all these doctors and people who were reading the journals. So I think it's time for more, people looking into the facts rather than all the smoke and all the misinformation. And you are that. You are just facts. And I love that about you.
Thanks, George. I appreciate that. And wanted to thank you again for agreeing to talk to me in the first place. I think we actually found our connection through Dr. Paul Cottrell, who was one of the really early guys on YouTube, along with guys like Shrimp Zoo, warning people about the pandemic. And of course, Sean Atwood, who is also on BNT, as many of you know, a brand new tube. Sean Atwood and Sonia Polton have a show, and I encourage people to check that out. But for those that don't know you, George, can you just give a slight background? Because I know we could talk, for days about what your work is, and that's actually what we've been doing recently a lot. But how does what you do connect to the infamous and notorious Jeff Epstein?
Yeah, well, for those who don't know me, I'm also an investigative journalist. I'm also kind of a facts kind of guy. And where I got involved with Jeff Epstein was back in Oregon. There was a drug route going from, people can argue whether it's a Mossad drug route or not, from Pinal Air Base in Arizona, just over the border on the Mexican border there, with a company called Evergreen Aviation. And I was at the other end of the rat line, if you will. Just being a dad with 2 kids, just wanting the best for my family and so forth. And they were flying these flights in from Evergreen Aviation into various airports around the United States. It looked like big ones were coming into Pinal, and then little ones were leaving Pinal, coming into these little regional airports. And one of them, or a couple of them, were near this Evergreen Aviation, which built spy gear for the Central Intelligence Agency. And I knew a lot of people at the headquarters at Evergreen, and I interviewed there. I didn't go to work there as a programmer, but it just seemed like with the increase in the Evergreen flights, the increase of the overdose deaths, the increase of crime, especially down in the middle inner city in Portland. And I became very active about Evergreen. When Twitter came on, I wrote for the local newspaper before social media. And then when Twitter came in, I started tweeting a lot about the local police doing kind of funny stuff, looking the other way on a lot of this stuff. They were actually selling the drugs on site at schools, and I just couldn't believe it. And then I started connecting the dots on this with the corruption in our state prison system. And it looked like, the Epstein organization, I don't know, again, we don't know if it's Mossad or not, was actually engaging these state police, right, and state prisons as recruiting grounds for runners for this business, for this drug business, and weapons seem to be going the other direction. So I kept it up until one day, in my house, I had a nice big house, and I was doing well selling. I didn't want to be a journalist. I was selling, I was selling network analysis software and doing network analysis. And then a big giant coffin was cut in my office. I bought my second big house. I walked into it. We were getting ready, got the keys, getting ready to, I'd been there before, no hole. Then there was this giant coffin that was cut in. And that's really when I decided, hey, I don't think I can do what I did before. I have to get into the citizen journalism thing because they're not going to let me out of this. I either have to fight against this or it's curtains. So that's why I got in this is because of evergreen aviation. If I had to boil it all down to one word, it would be evergreen. And Jeff Epstein was a key pilot in this operation. He later graduated. He moved up to the Columbus to Hong Kong drug route, and then later moved to New York with Les Wexner after he made, after he got his bones with Les Wexner in Columbus. Then he moved to New York and then started laundering the money. So that's the progression I have with Jeff Epstein. And a lot of people don't seem to be able to see the Mossad connection. Everybody says the father of Ghislaine Maxwell was Mossad. Everybody knows Robert Maxwell was Mossad, but they can't somehow, everybody knows, well, Les Wexner's Mossad, but they can't accept that Jeff Epstein's Mossad. They can't accept that Ghislaine Maxwell is Mossad. And I just think we have to get beyond, we have to take the blinders off and understand that this is bad Mossad, what I call bad Mossad. So there you go.
It's interesting. You mentioned the intelligence link there, George, with Mossad. And this is something that the mainstream media is all, basically ignoring and or omitting from their reporting on the Maxwell Epstein saga is their links to intelligence. And George and I played chess yesterday. And so closest game yet, but George still beat me yet again. But I kind of see Ghislaine Maxwell as the queen on the chessboard insofar as she was the most powerful, actually even more powerful than Epstein. But Epstein, once the king was captured, the game was over effectively, even for the queen now, as we see Ghislaine rested this past July. But what I think is interesting, George, is that most people don't link Jeff Epstein to drugs. They think of sex trafficking, right? They think of child trafficking. But for you, it was actually the drugs and the guns that linked you to the sex trafficking rather than the other way around, which I think is unique for a lot of investigative reporters. They don't necessarily make that link right away. And one thing we've been talking about too is the salacious nature of, sex trafficking stories has a lot more clickbait saliency to it, more so than drugs and guns. And despite that, George thinks, and I think he's right on this, is that the drugs and the guns are really the stronger power base, and the sex trafficking and blackmail, although key, very key to it, it's a form of insurance. George sees it as more as a symptom, right, than the cause of what's been going on itself. But do you want to expand on that, George? Just the differences you see between those?
Yeah, and people may be wondering all the videos going on and so forth around us, and these are just episodes that are playing behind us that are previous episodes from the Neighborhood News Hour. But the linkage between and this is our newsroom basically. We've got 2,000 square foot here in Michigan to try to get the word out about things like this. But the linkage is that if I bring in, let's say, an oil minister or a foreign minister, or let's say the Secretary of Defense of a given country, and I bring them into the UN, and I have a bunch of beautiful girls, and I have a party over at Jeff Epstein's house on the east side there near the UN, and the first, I roomed with a gal in New York who went to these parties and was a waitress. She also was a bada bing girl, and she also was on the cover of Playboy. So I know where the parties were, and I know who was at the parties. At least I knew that much. And this is 2002, 2003 timeframe. That was called the Stone Fortress. But it was mainly the UN people, but also some of the people from Wall Street were invited. And the first hour was kind of fun. All the waiters are really good looking. All the waitresses are really good looking. They're all young and they're flirtatious. And then the waiters and waitresses all, after the meal was served, would start banging the pots and pans, and they would come out in their evening apparel. And people who follow my channel may remember me talking about the assless chaps and all that the waiters and waitresses would be wearing. This was the signal that you needed to either make a decision about leaving or, hey, hang around for the fun. And this, so I can't imagine the girls I mean, I'm sure there's some girls that were underage and drugged and all that stuff, drugged on the boats, drugged at the island and so forth. But I do know some of the people that participated. And it was a pretty strong invitation to sex. And then Jeff had wired all the rooms with low light cameras and high fidelity microphones. And if you're the Secretary of Defense, let's say, or the defense minister for Congo, and you're caught with a 14-year-old in the United States, that means Preet Bharara out of the Southern District in New York can fly in a Navy SEAL team working with the JTTF, the Joint Terrorism Task Force, and come get you. Okay. So you're not safe in your own country. You think you're safe in your own country when you go back, but you are owned by Jeff Epstein. And if you don't make the deal that Jeff Epstein and Les Wexner want you to make on uranium or cobalt in Congo or tantalum in Congo, then they're going to come for you. You're going back on your deal, or they'll embarrass you. And that is the compromise operation that Jeff was running on the west side. On the east side. I don't know about any of the other stuff. I don't know about New Mexico. All I have is a contact saying he's flying back and forth with the Secretary of Energy, which is Bill Richardson. And he's on the helicopter going back and forth between Sandia Labs, Los Alamos Labs, and the ranch up there. Now, is that because they're partying with people at the Department of Energy, partying at people doing the weapons development at Sandia Labs, and they're having a good time, and they're also photographing there? I don't have any evidence of that. All I have is witnesses saying he's flying his Dying Corps helicopter back and forth between the state capitol, the Sandia, Los Alamos. Lisa Page's dad worked at Los Alamos. Interesting. You know, maybe somebody there who's inviting people to go. I know that I don't know any more than that, other than this was happening also in New Mexico. So I'll leave it there, other than saying these are interesting clues about the beginnings of Jeff Epstein that no one seems to be dealing with. They all seem to jump at the latest thing. When Ghislaine Maxwell drops a hamburger in the street, there's other YouTube channels that will do whole hour episodes on how that's a fake picture of the hamburger. And I can't imagine how people spend their time on this. You have to spend your time with who they're with, what the tail numbers say. I published the tail numbers of Jeff Epstein and Dying Corps planes and Dying Corps helicopters 3 or 4 years ago. You have to focus on the routes that those planes take. You have to really get down to the metadata and get your mind off the In-N-Out burger. So that's what I've tried to bring to this, and Addy is doing the same thing.
Got a question here from Natalia. George is on YouTube, Natalia. We are here live actually at the Neighborhood News Hour. So if you want to go on YouTube, type in Neighborhood News Hour. Otherwise, the link to Neighborhood News Hour YouTube channel is in the description box below. And does he have a BNT account? I believe he does. He only, I think, has transferred one video on there. Is that true?
BNT? Oh, yeah. Yes, I do. Okay. And I'm going to be posting this, hopefully, to the BNT account.
Definitely. Yeah, and we'll get George to transfer more of his videos over there. It's hard when, YouTube just randomly takes away 4,000 videos of yours at the drop of a hat. But I wanted to ask you, George, do you remember the first time you heard the name Jeffrey Epstein?
I don't know if I heard his name in New York or not. Trump owned the plaza at that time, or was just looking at the plaza. And there was also parties at the plaza. I know my gal from Brazil, and she had 2 sisters on 47th Street, right there in the Diamond District, where Little Brazil actually it was called, had the island. I haven't been to the island. I mean, I've been in the water attacked by a lemon shark almost at the island. I've been on Biden Island. I've been at the submarine bullpen near Biden Island. All that was on video, but I've never been to any of the other Epstein locations. But I think I heard his name in 2002. My roommate also would go. She was with a Secret Service agent, by the way, and he worked for Bill Clinton in Harlem. So they would go out to the Hamptons every weekend. I don't know if it was Manafort's place or who, but Epstein, I also thought, had a place way out there And she would go, I never went to one of those, but they would go also out to the Hamptons on the weekend, which is a big thing in New York at that time. So I may have heard it in 2002. There was this person who was, talking about it, which was the Secret Service agent, and talking about Epstein. There was this black book back then, but that came a little bit later with a guy named Paul Rodriguez. And I later was able to talk to Paul Rodriguez in Philadelphia. He was from the Washington Post. So I know I had heard it before 2003, but I can't remember if it was 2002 when exactly, but that's when I heard the name. But it was around this idea of there being a black book. Not the black book for the plane.
Okay, so not the flight log.
Not the flight log book, but there was another black book that was sort of a diary of the New York's people, not the flight log thing. And I see, this is what I believe, that the book that I was talking about and the Secret Service had was regarding the New York property and the stuff happening at the Long Island property. I don't think it had anything to do with the New Mexico property, and I don't think it had anything to do with the Water Island and St. John's thing. And I think there were separate black books. I'm not saying they didn't overlap, but I think what you see in the press is a replaced black book from the real black book and the real customers that are there, and it's deliberately. I'm not saying those people didn't go, but it's a partial black book of the people who went. You're going to find a lot of people that were scientists at Los Alamos, a lot of secretaries or defense ministers, a lot of foreign ministers. At least that's who she said went to the parties. My roommate, at least that's who she said went to the parties. And that's why the black book, there was some information traded, and I don't want to get anybody in trouble, but wasn't the same black book as the one that I ended up sharing with Paul Rodriguez. Was not the same black book as the one that you all know about as the airline black book.
Gotcha. And doing my reading this morning, I have to say, I think the most frequently encountered phrase was objection to the form and foundation from Mr. Pagliuca, who is Ghislaine's lawyer during this deposition, which is the majority of the documents that were released today. And the Manhattan Circuit of Appeals rejected Ghislaine's request to keep those files that were released today sealed due to the possibility of them impeding her defense. That was the argument she made. But just in what I read this morning, I wrote down some quotes I thought I wanted to share. And so for the flight logs that George mentioned, they put down initials, and they asked her about GW, and she said, G can stand for any level. It could be Georgina, George. So, did George Webb fly on the Lolita Express? GW and JE.
No. No. So this is kind of funny because there was another Paul Rodriguez, and I don't know if this has ever came out or not, but there was another Paul Rodriguez that was the butler.
The butler who didn't he died recently, didn't he?
He died a long time ago.
Oh, he did.
He died.
The butler usually knows everything, right?
Well,
I mean, do you know the circumstances of his death there, George? Was it one of these?
I thought he died in around 2007 when they finally came out with the. He was a fact witness, and when they finally came out with the wrist slap, the one that Alex Acosta did.
Okay. Yep. The sweetheart deal.
The sweetheart deal wasn't announced until 2014 or something like that. But 2007 was the bust, I think. The indictment of the 40 girls and stuff. Maybe I might be wrong a couple of years because it's been a while now.
Yeah, I think it was 07 or 08.
Okay,
in there.
But that was because of Paul Rodriguez, and because he was actually a fact witness. Just having a book saying all these people were here and all these girls are, saying they've been sexually abused. If none of them are willing to testify, if they're all afraid for their lives, you need a third party who is going to come in and go, I saw her perform this act on this guy at this time. Okay, there was also video evidence of the same type of thing going on in New York. So I believe the Secret Service ran that operation. But again, people have torn into me because I went and gave what I thought was evidence of that to. I went to George Bush. I sat and actually where George Bush. I didn't want to be a journalist. I said maybe this Clinton's doing this stuff. Clinton supposedly is on this tape. I didn't know if it was actually Clinton or not, but if it was, let them run through it with, George Bush, the CIA. So I went up to Kenny Bunkport and I actually went to the place he used to eat. And I'd say, I want to leave something here for George Bush. And the waiter came over and said, you're sitting in George Bush's chair. But later I was contacted and somebody said, well, we want you to come up to give it to a reporter in where Hillary Clinton's from, up there.
New York, Buffalo?
Chappaqua. Where Andy McCabe also had a place. Anyway, it was a fireman versus police baseball game, and I met the reporter there. Supposedly, I chucked the thumb drive in the car, and I drove away. Was that Andy McCabe's car? I don't know. I'm not trying to say it was Andy McCabe's car, but we later found out Andy McCabe did have a place right next to Hillary Clinton in Chappaqua, and he was running these operations, seemingly with Jeff Epstein, to do compromise on people who were in the Senate. So in Washington, D.C., and they'd sort of moved the operation out of the West Wing of the White House when Hillary left with Peter Strzok and McCabe. I was only saying McCabe for the last 4 years. I didn't know Strzok until 2 years ago, but it seemed like they were moving the counterintelligence operation up to Chappaqua.
So is Andy McCabe also Mossad, do you think?
No, but he is definitely compromised Mossad. He's been Mossad compromised, and so is Peter Strzok, or else they're just playing old CIA with FBI badges. We know Strzok was getting a CIA check at the same time of getting an FBI check, but was also Andy McCabe. I just think Andy McCabe is just compromised.
Yeah, and I wanted to bring up Leon Black because this is something that has been in the news recently. Billionaire who's funneled millions of dollars to Jeff Epstein after he was a convicted sex offender in 2008, and his company recently hired a private firm to investigate the relationship between Leon Black and Jeff Epstein. And I wanted to bring Detroit Dave up here because he has some knowledge that he can impart as far as Leon Black, his father, and the Apollo Group, as they are called. Isn't that right, Dave?
Right. So Leon Black is the son of Eli Black. He's started a investment firm called the Apollo Group. The father was the character that we were studying when we were studying Max Fisher and United Fruit Company. His father was the one that commits suicide, jumped out of the Pan Am building when Max Fisher slid into the CEO role of United Company at that time. That was, the legacy was United Fruit Company. They changed the name to just United at that point. But
okay, and Fisher's protege was Wexner, right?
Correct.
Wexner
And
okay.
Epstein.
Okay, then both. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
So do we know, gentlemen, who? Because I've heard people talk about this too, even like really well-researched people. Was Wexner Epstein's boss, or was Epstein Wexner's boss? Do you guys think?
I want to add one element here that I think is really important background. That this is going back to 1982. This is a case called the Inslaw claims. This involved a journalist named Danny Casolaro that was murdered during this investigation. But what he was looking into was this software called Promise Software, which George has done a lot of reporting on. Bob Maxwell was the broker of this technology, which was being sold to different sheriff departments, I believe, to sort of gather information about the criminal database. It was a way to make an electronic version of this prisoner data. And there was this.
And I just want to throw in there, it was also being sold by Bob Maxwell to defense ministers overseas, and this idea of hiring the prisoners to be the drug runners, saying, hey, do you want to get out today? You want to spend another night with Bubba, or do you want to sell drugs from Assad? So it wasn't just U.S. and Maxwell was the key guy selling it overseas. So I just wanted to throw that. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
Dave's talking.
And also with, just the history of these characters, I know everybody just wants to, talk about Jeff and the island, the Little Jeff's Island in the Bahamas. But, Bob Maxwell was a character that was a business partner with Mark Rich, who we talked a lot about yesterday, doing these energy deals all around the world. So, in these groups, I feel like you have your different characters. You have your kind of deal makers, for the energy deals, and then you have your PR people. They're doing the cover. Maxwell's background was, I believe it was the Mirror Group, which is like a large magazine newspaper company in England. So again, that just sort of ties into this legacy that we've been learning about as far as like media companies and newspapers, magazines having these intelligence roots. A lot of these magazines were founded by former OSS members. So again, to me, the way I look at this is just this legacy of, infiltration in the media, in the news. That's what Maxwell's role was to me, was that he was, controlling public thought and consciousness through, newspaper articles and different media. But he was also working with these software deals, trying to get systems created where he could use the existing systems like the prison systems and the sheriff departments. I think it ties into what we're talking about with Jeffrey Epstein and his relationship with DynCorp, and they're partnering with different law enforcement agencies around the country. So again, it's like when we just talk about Jeff and Virginia, and these things. I mean, not to say that those things didn't happen, but to me that's a part of the story. But the bigger part is this legacy, going back to really going back to the OSS and when they first started creating like television.
With course, Operation Mockingbird as a huge medium for that, right?
Right, and that would be that's an example of intelligence services sort of partnering with the media to create control messaging. And again, what we're trying to do here is to just gather information, study the history, try to lay it out in a way that people can understand, so that they can reevaluate these things and not just think of Ghislaine as this recruiter for prostitutes, basically, or illegal prostitutes. But she also had technical skills that are not discussed. She's a helicopter pilot. She's a submarine pilot. So there's much more to the story than that. So again, it's an important element to consider. But there's a lot of other key points that hopefully you don't gloss over with just the the headlines.
Yeah, and I think one good thing about having that headlines is being able to hook people's attention, but then bring them deeper into like Ghislaine's father, Bob, which as we know how his fate ended up, is a frogman team on the dinghy, and he was basically losing control of his media empire as far as the finances were concerned, and demanded money from Mossad basically in the state, and they took care of him. So once he became a liability, they did that. And I don't know. What do you guys think about Ghislaine? Maybe George can answer this, and then we'll go back to Dave. Ghislaine Maxwell surviving until the trial. Is there any chance that this happens? What do you guys think?
Well, I just want to pick up on what Dave said before, just about the publishing thing, which is you cannot gloss this over, because when somebody buys something for, I think he owns the Times Mirror, the Mirror Group,
I think it was like a giant media.
But then he owned another publishing company. He began with a P. I can't remember. It was a scientific publisher. And Mossad always was trying, the early days of Mossad, I have a lot of time for, because, 6 nations surrounding you and, all ready to attack, and the Yom Kippur, Golda Meir was about ready to move the capital. The Syrians were half an hour away from Jerusalem. So I have a lot of time for the old Mossad espionage that maybe some of the Bob Maxwell stuff. But Mossad was always trying to get the intellectual property, always trying to get the nuclear property. Dave mentioned the Apollo Group, and that goes back to Zalman Shapiro, if you can get metallic uranium, 95% enriched uranium, that's what powered Dimona. That's what got us started. I mean, that's what got Israel started on the secret nuclear power plant program and got Israel the nuclear weapons. We don't need 100. I'm not saying we need 100 nuclear weapons, but I'm just saying it somewhere between 10 and 20 really makes you think before you attack Israel again. So that was the old Bob Maxwell. He was getting all these technical documents, and that job seemed to be kind of taken over in Columbus by Lisa Page's dad. Lisa Page's dad kind of took over the scientific journals and was doing all the recruiting. Pergamon Press, yeah.
Encyclopedias.
Yeah, but Pergamon had also the scientific journals, and we were just talking about Schwartz today, Aaron Schwartz. And you remember Aaron, he had one thumb drive, one day at MIT, and he was going to get the JSTOR documents, the journal storage, all these scientific and technical journals. They were being put behind a paywall at MIT. And he went in there with one thumb drive one day, and they were threatening him with 20 years. He finally committed suicide because he thought he was going to spend the rest of his life in jail. Then they came out and said, oh, you got to put him in jail 6 months. But there's another one where you got Imran Awan at the Library of Congress with 5,111 illegal entries into the Library of Congress every day. And he gets off for wearing an ankle bracelet for a couple of months. So you always have to look at the intellectual property. You always have to look at where Mossad's going to get intellectual property. And there's a good Mossad. The thing I've said for 4 years is there is a good Mossad. There are people who don't want World War. They don't want to make money selling dark weapons all over the world, like the Jeff Epsteins and the Khashoggis and so forth. Those are the Jared Kushners. Those are the people that are leaking stuff right now. They're trying to, the Bibi Netanyahus. I know a lot of people hate Bibi Netanyahu, but I'm just saying he's good Mossad. So that's a lot. That's a lot.
I want to say disclaimer.
I know.
Don't shoot the messenger. Okay. I'm just the host here. I do not take the views of Detroit Dave or George Webb exclusively. But I just want to let people know that we are all about free speech here. And everyone, can give their opinions, but I just want to let people know I don't necessarily espouse the views of my interviewees. So let that be known. But huge release today of these documents. And another kind of funny quote that I wrote down as I was reading this morning, they're going over her citizenship and being British and French. And then she also said, the question was, are you a citizen of any other land? To which Maxwell responded, Terramar. So it kind of plays into that globalist idea of the one government, one world, the international waters type of clause.
Well, Terra is the land, though, so that's land and water, Terra and Mar.
Yeah, but water and ocean, but Terra Mar. I've seen Ghislaine Maxwell give speeches on how 85% of the world's land, or of the 75% of the world covered in ocean, 85% of it is public. Like we can go claim it. So if we can get our Terra Mar submersible there, and I can, get 1 teaspoon of tantalum or we can claim it, right? We can claim that vast area. And that's the other thing you have to look at with Ghislaine, is this constant move for the precious metals. That's another thing you can't leave out of this. Everyone wants to go for this is, some girl that, in the child trafficking. And that, I know how reprehensible that is, but a lot of the girls that get in these kidons, these KIDONs, this is the Israeli group of 12, and that's how Mossad organizes their intelligence. A lot of them are trained together. They know that they're going to be lures. It's a part of the job. And I know how hard that is for people to hear, but it is the way it is. And kidons are the way that Mossad organizes. And a lot of the girls were in kidons. So
if you've ever seen the movie Munich, which is about I think it was 72 bombing, and there is I don't know I didn't double check the script or anything, but there's one Conus Lure, as we call them, or basically an attractive woman who is part of one of these kidons and seduces this guy to kill him. So I mean, these spy girls do exist, and our friend Dave here is an expert on the spy girls. He loves the spy.
I love the spy girls, but just going back to I also like the Jacques Cousteau and that kind of idea of claiming things under the sea in the public land. And so, of course, I think of Howard Hughes being one of the pioneers with his Glomar Explorer, which was an incredible engineering feat to be able to use a crane to pull things off the bottom of the ocean floor. And then with Mark Husatonic talking about Paul Allen,
at Microsoft.
Yeah, after he retired from Microsoft, he put a lot of his fortune into doing these exploration projects where he had different submarine technology and boat technology. He actually was the one that discovered the USS Indianapolis, which was the the worst American naval disaster in history. And so he was the one that found that boat. So again, there are not many people that that have the resources to be doing this kind of work. And so just the fact that Ghislaine is in there, it does make me think that, that would be.
Yeah. So the question, guys, back to the question, will she survive until July? What do you guys think? Can they allow that? Can the deep state allow that to happen?
I don't know. I mean, to me, it's, there's so much information out there, and I feel, it's,
Do you believe she's arrested? Do you believe she's even in jail, or is she in Israel? Right
well, let me have a whack at I think there's something called what I call a slap and seal, where you give a wrist slap to somebody and then you can seal everything they ever did. So it's sort of like arresting a serial killer for also stealing a watch out of a person that they murdered. Okay, you could arrest them for stealing the watch, and then you could say you do 30 days at the county jail for or 30 or 10 days reading a New York Times, come in on Sundays, leave on Monday, like Jeff Epstein, his sentence that he had, the New York Times reading room that he had,
where you would just leave whenever he wanted.
Yeah, he would come in to read the paper and then leave.
And you have to remember too.
But I just want to finish the story. That then you seal the case and everything they did wrong. So it's wrist slap, and then you seal the case and you say, oh, here's 10 years of murder, all these things, blackmail, and then okay, well that goes away. Yeah, so so whether she dies or not, I consider immaterial. That's that's Adam Schiff and his bad script writing, or on the other side we have Steve Bannon with his bad script writing. So whether she dies or not really is immaterial, because Mossad, remember Bob Maxwell died at sea, Jeff Epstein died under wacky circumstances. Whether they decide to kill her off or not, the number one thing is where does she go when she's in the house in New Hampshire? She goes and puts her fingers on the Cargometrics laptop of her husband. Cargometrics is going to be the key. It's the electronic devices that are key, that are shipping all this stuff around. As soon as she touches that, it becomes evidence. And now they can slap, and now they can seal it, and the Cargometric stuff goes away.
And just adding to the slap and seal, I mean, and this is something I don't really understand either, is why Ghislaine hasn't been charged for molestation or child sex abuse if there's pretty much the same testimonies against her, not as obviously frequent, but I've read the documents. I've read some of the documents, so it's puzzling why she only got the trafficking charges and not any of the sex abuse or molestation charges. But just adding on to the slap and seal concept that George was saying. But you had something you wanted to add?
Well, I was just going to, in the spirit of, following this article or the story, the way Epstein was framed originally was, they would refer to him as like the massage maven. They almost made it look like his activity was just, really successful businessman that has this huge sexual appetite and just requires, that has all this stress of his job, and that, Ghislaine's out, picking up all these trailer park girls and, giving them this opportunity. The way it was framed initially was not like he's this monster, so whenever I see that, I'm just skeptical of the whole story, anything I read. That's why, going into this, the Promise software, the, him, working at Rickenbacker Airport, managing this airfield with Wexner with their, international shipping business, what they're shipping, we don't know exactly, but we assume it's the limited products, but also mixed in with other things. So a lot of this stuff, it's to me, it's really it's hard to talk about because obviously nobody is in favor of abusing children or using their power to take advantage of people.
Right.
So just the way it was framed, in the media, it almost acted like he was, just a rich, handsome, older guy that was taking advantage of his, situation. So again, like when you ask specifically, like what will happen with Ghislaine, like I feel like the way it's covered is so sensational. I don't really believe much the way the coverage goes down anyway. So, that's why I like to try to focus more on what are the business relationships and the legacies in those.
Could you expand on what you mean by that, Dave? Like, basically, you don't believe, a lot of the sensationalist aspects.
I think it could happen. I could see.
What do you mean? What could happen?
That he's recruiting, having, beautiful young girls. Again, like I think of even like the Robert Kraft, the owner of the Patriots, and being, involved in this sting operation at the Asian spa in Palm Beach. To me, these stories just run together. They're trying to make, this kind of activity is just sort of like, like these guys, they have so much money and they're just, this is just the way it is. And, it's there's, to me, like when you see those things, that's the,
well, I want to ask you about Virginia Joffrey because Giuffre, Roberts.
Virginia
how do you
Roberts.
spell it? No. What do you think about her? Because you mentioned something to me off camera. I don't know if you want to repeat it on camera. Would you be able to just share your thoughts on Virginia?
I mean, from what, watching George and sort of this kid on program, like what my understanding was that the Little St. James Island was affiliated with this elite prep school, similar to what I went to at in Beverly Hills, Michigan. Really smart kids, really basically like training future leaders, and that's what I saw as far as like a lot of the relationships he had with the people in the island. He was involved with this school, so as we're talking about this stuff, if you are running these high-tech facilities or, operating sophisticated equipment, you need to have a pool of people that can do those jobs. And when we talk about Ghislaine, flying helicopters and piloting submarines, but there's a lot of training and a lot of practice that goes involved with having those skills. And I see that. What was the Russian girl that was learning on Jeff's lap at like age?
Marchenko.
Marchenko, yeah, Nadia
right.
Marchenko.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And
so she's a pilot now, and so I don't know exactly what her background was as far as like compromise or being an Oconus lure, but we do know that she is a pilot and that she was trained to do that work, and
she was a recruiter too.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Of the girls.
And I'll just throw in here just to say the Israeli services obviously use women just as much as they do the men, usually for more of the remote cam drone stuff. But her parents were, again, they always say Russia, 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 but a lot of these people were recruited by Mark Rich and brought to by Mark Rich and Ben Gurion because of Israel's defense industry. And as the Soviet Union was the only other country in the world that had a nuclear program for a long time, Mark Rich would go there for bioweapons scientists. He would go there for aviation people. He'd go there for advanced missile people, and he would bring them to the Negev. And they established a school that Mark Rich is one of the founders of in the Negev with Ben Gurion at Ben Gurion University. So this is heart and soul of Russian Jewry, right? Which was, we would make a big stink about some scientists and how bad it was, and threaten to throw sanctions on until whoever the Russian president would send over another 50 to Israel for the weapons programs. So I think this is the thing, the heart and soul of what Bob Maxwell was doing. Is the heart and soul of what Wexner's doing. Is very with the mega group, with the Bronfmans and Matt, you mentioned Max Fisher. This is the heart and soul. These are the fathers. These are the founding fathers of Israel. You have to think of them like the way Israel thinks of them as Washington, Jefferson, Adams, and etc. That's what's going on here. So these people are, in their mind, are very, very patriotic. Very patriotic.
I wanted to tie what we're talking about today, guys, with Biden, because of the Hunter Biden stuff that is going on. I think, it would be cool if we could just touch on the Bidens a bit. Particularly, I want to segue it from the Biden Island, which is very close to Epstein's, which a lot of people don't know, is that Joe Biden also had an island. He also had a private island. I think it was 8 minutes or 8 miles.
8 miles line of sight
from Little St. James, or Little St. Jeff's, as he called it. But could you guys expand on your knowledge of Biden
I just
Island?
want to say one thing before George goes. There's one more island you have to throw in there, and it's called Andros Island, and it has the Toto, and that's a key.
Andros Island.
Andros Island.
So George knows all about this. So
yeah,
he can,
and I might let you do Andros, but so first of all, I've been to Water Island. You may have seen me actually look straight down on the submarine bullpen. It used to be in a U.S. submarine base, and a great place if you're running rat lines of drugs or weapons if you had a Terramar submersible. And if you were a Terramar pilot, it would be great. But the other island across from St. James, and I went there to this island, was St. John's, which is directly across from 1 mile to Prince Andrew over there in the British Virgin Islands. And I have safe, if I go 1 mile from where I am on Jeff's Island, U.S. Virgin Islands, over to the other island there across the Isles in St. John's, I'm in Andy's territory. I'm in Prince Andrew's territory. And what Dave is saying is that's your NATO. If you wanted the NATO treasure trove of weapons of all time, and our number one partner in NATO is the UK, right? You get it there at Andros. Andros is a huge training base. It's been used by the CIA and MI6 all the way back to the Bay of Pigs. And what he's talking about, the Toto, is called the tongue of the ocean, is there. It goes down 26,000 feet. I remember actually touring that on a boat and looking at how deep it was there. And the reason why, if you're running rat lines and you're running people back and forth, is most aviation, like a P3 O'Brien or different, even with the most sophisticated magneto detection equipment, can't get down that deep. So if you have a submarine or a deep submersible, you ain't going to find it. If you want to store something like atomic weapons that you've stolen out of Arizona or whatever, you want to store them in the tongue of the ocean. And then it's just a matter of going to the storage cabinet and picking them up and moving it. There's literally that's why the UK and the United States test their stuff at Andros. And it is such a quick hop. I was in between there when the lemon shark came up behind me and almost, bit my leg off there, but kept going because I don't know. I guess I had the spirit with me that day. But anyway, that's what Dave's talking about on Andros Island. It is where all the training, not just training for submarines, but all Navy training for the Caribbean happens. A huge amount of helicopter traffic by the Coast Guard uses it for operations, for hurricane operations, a huge Air Force base there, a huge Navy base there. Not Air Force, but Air Force joint base there. And it is where it's just like a big funnel. And then Andy is sitting there, Prince Andrew, acting as an agent of selling this technology in exchange for kickbacks to the royal family. They just turn the spigot on and it just flows straight into Little St. James. And this is going to be the real story. I know that how much people want to go and look at the hair pulling, that I call it, between Dershowitz and Joffrey and Roberts. Right. But she actually liked Andy, and you're going to find it at the end of the day, they like each other a lot. And Joffrey's father, people don't know, Robert's father was a greenskeeper at Mar-a-Lago and using that as a recruiting base to bring people to the island. So it's hard for me to believe that, that your dad's in there. He's mowing on the greens. He's running people over as they're about ready to come off the 18th green and saying, "Hey, how you doing?" And, "Oh, we're just going to have a party. Where are you guys going?" And then sending them over. First place they would go was in West Palm Beach, but then they would then fly them over for these trips. And they were again targeting these scientists. They were doing these scientific councils. This is Les Wexner putting all the money into Ohio State, Max Fisher putting all the money into the University of Michigan. This is a targeting operation. And that, I guess, I don't mean to go on it too long, but that's what I believe is going on there.
I wanted to add to what George just said about Virginia, because I know she's quite a red line, I would say, for those that have been following this case and this story for a while. It's quite sensitive to talk about, but I think it's important to talk about because the fact of the matter is we don't know if she is not a state actor of some sort. And the thing is, too, is we're not saying that we're, it's this light switch thinking, right? Where, obviously trafficking is reprehensible, but when it's been going on over an extended period of time with a legal adult in most of the world, and she's getting compensated. I read her entire account, really, and she seemed to me quite enamored with the lifestyle to a certain degree. And this is her own words. So I think that it's important to question all of it, really, and not just fall in love with the idea of a narrative, especially one that the mainstream media is very much behind.
And this is not speculation. She would go over to people over at the Mar-a-Lago swimming pool and say, hey, blah, 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 we have this place out here, and recruit. So it wasn't just the father, the Greens, running people over with his mower, to get them to interrupt them, to invite them out there. She was actually going around the pool and recruiting around the pool. So anytime I see somebody recruiting, I think they're more part of the operation than not part of the operation. Now you could have this big hair pulling contest between Dershowitz, so he gets his free press, and then Roberts, she gets her free press, just because they filed a $400 lawsuit. That's going to create the smokescreen of all time. That means we can't look at the metadata. No, I think it's time to look at the metadata. So
one more point too, with the activity in the Caribbean after. When we were setting up the CIA, a major base was set up in Miami, also in New Orleans and Guatemala. So we were running a lot of our activity, basically through the entire Cold War, was going through this, the Gulf of Mexico. And so the legacy of these deals going on, it didn't just, start happening in the 80s or whatever with Bob Maxwell. Even going back to the days of, Johnny Depp as the Pirates of the Caribbean, the prize courts, with Admiralty law, the different islands, they had different rules as far as privateering and trading. Obviously, with the colonization, a lot of the merchants were in these areas, and they had, so there's a long history of these areas sort of being used as, proxies to maybe avoid, doing a deal with the United States. If
you're saying this is nothing new for Andrew and the Queen, because this goes back to Queen Victoria. We're giving these buccaneers their privateering.
Yeah, we're talking about the geography right now, people in the Virgin Islands.
And also, prize court, it was a system for when a merchant ship was captured. They actually had a legal system where they would go in front of a prize court judge and sort of decide how to do the distribution. So that was a system that was in place, sort of during this age of sail and colonization.
Yeah. And
Go ahead, George.
There are many who think there is a privy council still. I mean, there still is a privy council. We know there's a privy council. These are the counselors to the Queen, and that they actually, if you actually see the privy council occurring, it's like the Queen shall be garnished in red carnations, at Buckingham Palace at this hour, and it's just these kind of all things. The color will be trooped at 2 a.m., or 2 p.m. Her saddle shall be shined, this way. But in actual fact, there is this ancient, like you're saying, the private court or prize court that supposedly the Privy Council is still a part of, and can issue edicts. So there is this air of legitimacy to Jeff Epstein taking half of Congo, or Jeff Epstein acquiring all these mines in Zaire, or whatever Tanzania operations, or etc.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say,
I don't know that to be true. I just know that that Richard Branson's dad was on the Privy Council. Grandfather.
You would expect the British East India Company to probably be the most likely person to appear in a prize court, also in history. So
as the winner.
I'm sure as the winner, but I mean, but it was the trade companies that would be, getting into these, legal disputes that were being, decided between. And again, a pirate was a privateer. That was also like a trade company, was something that the monarch gave them a privilege to basically rob the, competing countries. And
then if they get caught and whoops,
Yeah, and like what George was saying with Queen Elizabeth, I mean, she was. Sir Francis Drake and, these guys, they were made knights and famous because they were robbing the Spanish silver galleons, that were coming from, Mexico and Central and South America. So this history of privateering and, there are rules. I mean, we all think of, the pirate movies where it's just, kind of a ragtag bunch of guys, capturing ships. But the reality is that there was a legal system that they, were a part of. And, it's just things that people need to keep in mind that, this kind of idea of, stealing secrets or IP It's just the modern version of the same thing. It's just
Right.
that we're, you know, on computers now.
So I wanted to share a quote. We're at an hour here, folks, before we sign off. This is again from the documents that were released today. It's just something I wanted to share. The question was, so Ms. Maxwell, when did you first recruit a female to work for Mr. Epstein? Ghislaine Maxwell responds, first of all, can you please clarify the question? I don't understand what you mean by female. I don't understand what you mean by recruit. Please be more clear and specific. It's kind of funny. Just playing dumb a little there.
Just fighting with semantics.
Yeah.
You're just stuck in the mud, spinning the wheels. You know, it doesn't really do much.
Some legality dumbness right there.
Lawyers probably love that kind of talk.
So this has been the first episode of the Epstein Files. I hope everyone enjoyed it, and been great broadcast here on Brand YouTube. It's our first broadcast on Brand YouTube on my channel, and I've been joined here by Detroit Dave, aka Dave Underdown, and of course the incomparable George Webb, sharing his expertise on weapons trafficking, and of course our good friend Jeff Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. So I just wanted to thank everybody for tuning in. Please give me a subscription on Brand YouTube, and if you guys want to check out our collective broadcasts here at the Neighborhood News Hour, the link should be in the description box below. Otherwise, you can go to YouTube and type in Neighborhood News Hour. You can also go to nnhour.com. Hour is in the time, Houre. And George's Twitter is also in the description box. George without an E at the end, and then Webb with 2 B's. And I can put Dave's Twitter in. Do you want to share your Twitter, Dave? What's your Twitter?
I don't even know what it is.
Oh, I'll put it in the description box.
Yeah, I'd have to look it up. I don't know exactly.
So so follow us on Twitter, folks. And I think we're going to do this again at some point, I hope, and just get the broadcasting out on Brand YouTube and try to build up our viewership here. So I want to thank everybody for tuning in. And if there was technical difficulties, I don't think there was any. I saw some people commenting. So I want to thank everybody. Catherine, great stream, guys. Really appreciate that.
I just want to say in passing, I may have heard the name Jeff Epstein before 2003. So I know there's going to be trolls out there saying, oh, you know, you saw this document before that in 2002 or whatever that may come out with the Secret Service and so forth. I just want to say it's been a while. It's been 20 years or almost 20 years now. So, you know, there you have it.
Stay frosty, folks, and we'll see you all next time.